Since his last visit, he's been busy. He's published 9 additional books for young people, won the prestigious Carnegie and Caldecott medals, and was even appointed National Ambassador for Young People's Literature by the former Librarian of Congress in 2020. His literary prowess continues to grow, and we are beyond thrilled that he has returned to speak with us today about his latest work, the young adult novel, 24 Seconds From Now. So without further ado, Mr. Jason Reynolds with Mary Haft.
Thank you so much, Jill and Becky. And I want to say they are the stewards of so much of the work that we do with our island students. What we say is our foundation work is done in full partnership, and they really are the leaders of our group, and their commitment and dedication to our young people is really unparalleled. And Jason, what I say is they give us their hopes, their dreams, and our mission at the Nantucket Book Foundation is to make their dreams come true. And one of those dreams, which we thought was maybe unattainable, was to get the magnificent Jason Reynolds. Could we convince him to come to our island? And what I was unprepared for, and I brought many authors, I was so unprepared for the fact that I was in the presence of like a rock star. I have never had a wake of unbelievable enthusiasm and just this generosity of spirit. Jason's like one of the most magnificent human beings. So it is pure joy to get to welcome Jason today. So with this story, so as you've gotten a sense of, it's an incredible reputation, a storied reputation, writing that is so vast and taps into a market for young people that really kind of was, not that it was unknown, but he's tapped into a vein that has been almost unparalleled. And you know, you would think, Jason, seeing this incredible literary career that you've created, and it now branches into a wide net. It's much larger than children, young adults, it's adult. He's going so many directions. One would think you were a little bookworm as a little boy.
No, I wasn't. First of all, hi everybody, it's good to see y'all. And of course, it's funny because people are wondering whether or not I can make it out if I'm going to come. And it's like, Bob Woodward's here. It's like, if he can get here, I can, I'm sure I can show up, No, but I was not a bookworm. I always laugh about my origin story as it pertains to this because most people in my position, they grew up reading. It's like my face was in the books since I was young, as long as I can remember. I had this strange obsession with books since I was a little boy or a little girl. And, it's like this is sort of a similar path, which makes sense, by the way, right? Like that seems like that would be the basic math, right? Like the pure science to become a writer. But for me, it was very different. I hated reading. And I thought, and the reason why is because it felt so distant. Reading felt like something, first of all, reading felt like homework. And second of all, in the 80s, when I was growing up, in the 80s and 90s, up through the 90s, the books that I was looking for either they did not exist or I did not have access to them, right? I'm growing up during the crack epidemic. I grew up in DC, so it's like if you have, and during that time, there's the crack epidemic, there's the beginning of HIV and AIDS, right? And then there's also the maturation of this music that is now taking over the world that we know as rap music now. But at this particular time, these are the three this is the tripod that is holding up my life, or at least that my life is revolving around, and there are no books about that during the time in which I was living it, right? There was no, like contemporary children's literature was like the Babysitter's Club. Right, and I wasn't living where they were living. That's not.
And there was a really singular voice that I remember you told me about that leads to rap. Who was that singular voice that kind of
that changed me?
Yeah.
In terms of the rappers, it was Queen Latifah.
Exactly.
I think that at some point there should be like Bob Woodward should write about Queen Latifah, right? I think he should just do like the real story about a woman that I actually believe has been grossly underrated as far as what she did in music, what she's done in business. I mean, we're talking about a young teenage girl who was signing her own checks, who had her own production company. This is before all the people that we think of now when we think of those people, right? Like this was a young mogul as a 19-year-old in a world full of men who was holding her own. Then she broke into television, right? Broke into TV at a young age, created a show that was then copied and turned into Friends, right? Then, we can go on and on and on. Man, she's still on television now.
But
Doing Kung Fu, by the way, which is a whole other thing.
wow. I mean, because what seems so amazing when you had said that to me is you think how powerful, and you think of the voices in music today that are reaching people, and you just have to be able to imagine that a singular voice outside the sphere of literature, of writing, could be the voice that galvanizes someone like Jason Reynolds.
Absolutely.
To say there's a voice here and I can find my way. So as you made your way, it wasn't, this is where you're going to relive, it wasn't that as he was referencing, it wasn't that he didn't like reading. He didn't find himself, as he's saying. He didn't find himself in these books. And when he came, he had a great line about...
Oh, yeah. Well, I said this is in Magazine, which is y'all magazine, just so you know.
And I wrote the article, so it's fair for him to read my words.
Where I say, you can't be what you can't see. Judy Blume wasn't coming to the hood. Dr. Seuss didn't come to the hood. You read a book about chasing a whale? Nah. I never met no whale before, so I ain't reading this, right? And that's really how I felt, right? By the way, Judy's one of my good friends, so she would come to the hood now if I invited her. But when I was a kid, Judy wasn't coming. You don't think of Judy Blume doing school visits, because school visits wasn't really a thing in the time in which she was sort of building her dynasty. So how would I have ever known? And Judy wasn't writing for me either, right? The first book, by the way, which I don't know how many real Judy fans we have in here. Everybody be pretending. The first book of Judy's is called Iggy's House. That one's for me. Judy was writing about race before she was writing about girls and sexuality and sort of reproductives and all the things about girlhood, right? Judy's first novel was actually about white flight in Detroit. People don't know it because she doesn't talk about it because she's a little embarrassed by it, even though it's brilliant. So do yourselves a favor. It came out in 1970 after Dr. King, so Iggy's House.
Exactly. So talk to us about representation, because your writing is this bridge to understanding really authentic stories.
Yeah.
And what are you trying to do for our children today?
I've been thinking a lot about this because the answer changes the more I learn about myself and my work, right? What I realized today, so 10 years ago I would have said, I'm just trying to figure out how to write young people. I have all these thoughts about, I'm writing to Black kids, I'm writing for all kids. I want Black kids to know that they need not be ashamed of their lives. I need everyone else to know they need not be afraid of Black kids' lives, right? That we can all just sort of live in this world and appreciate our differences and attach ourselves to our similarities and sort of navigate this strange ecosystem of humanity in a far more fair and equitable way, right? Cool. What I realize now, though, is yes, there's that. And also so that Black kids grow up to become Black adults with a literary archive. Because I don't have that. I can't point to any books that'll show you what life was like for me in 1991. Because it wasn't there. We were reading books about 1970s and 60s in 1991, right? And I want them to say, if you want to know what it was like to be a kid in 2025, you can read this, and this, right? But I realize now what I'm actually doing in all my books, because most writers write about the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And I think what I keep writing about is trying to figure out, understand, and deconstruct all the ideas around masculinity that's been pressed upon me and how they affect everything and everybody in my life. So I can't write about that without writing about the girls in my life, my mom and my daddy, my aunties and uncles, the neighborhoods, the coaches, the teachers, right? Everybody's involved in it, but I'm trying to understand what it is, if it's actually a thing, if it has to be a thing, and how do I sort of chip away at some of it so that there are more boys who feel more comfortable within themselves, and there are more girls who feel more comfortable around the boys who feel more comfortable around themselves.
Well, you have, though. Your stories do incorporate things that are from your life. I mean, I look at The Boy in the Black Suit, When I Was the Greatest, Long Way Down. Yeah. Can you talk about that? Because that is incorporating things that are very personal to you.
Yeah, I think it's all about, I think there is such a power in vulnerability. And so one thing about these books, all of the books, you're always going to find some boy crying, It's always going to be a boy who's emotional, just because I need boys to know, like, here's your secret space. If you feel like you got to hold it in, then open up this book. You can hide those tears in the pages of this book, because I already know your secrets. I already did it. Been there already, right? We're all sharing the same secrets, therefore it's not actually a secret. It's okay, right? And perhaps there is some sort of liberatory key here for some young man or for some young lady who is like, ugh, now I understand my brother, right? And so I think something like Long Way Down, which everybody turns into a book about violence, is actually a book about fear, a book about pressure. What does it mean to grow up in a community where you've been, where codes have been foisted upon you, codes that existed far before you were ever born, no crying, no snitching, and you always seek revenge. That's something that I grew up with that I did not create. But in precarious situations, in complex moments, I'm forced to then enact these laws, right? So that I keep up an ecosystem in a community that I had no part in creating that might land me in prison or dead, right? And Boy in the Black Suit, a young man dealing with loss. I dealt with loss very early in life. Some of us deal with that, right? It isn't, I remember people always come to me, always, every book, they're like, this doesn't really happen. And it's like, I can call the people this has happened to. I can introduce you to my mother. I can show you a place where people lose people starting at 7, 8 years old. I was a teenager. My first time as a pallbearer for a person my age. I was 14, 15, right? I'm burying my friends, right? And so I wanted to write about what is it like when the adults in your life don't actually know what to tell you in those moments. They don't know what to say, so they say things like, don't worry, everything will be okay. No, it won't, right? Things will change, right? And I'll live with the changes of that, but my life will never be the same, and I gotta carry that everywhere I go, haunted by that. I'm 41 years old, haunted by this that happened to me 30 years ago, and I'm okay with the haunting. I don't wanna forget these people. I'm okay with the pain. I don't want to lose the feeling of love I had for the people that I lost as a child. Right.
It's so profound, though, and as you're saying this, I know we're all moved. It's so profound. So when did you know you could take this and weave this into words and create a world and a story that does help another child, and in this case, you're helping a generation?
It came late for me. I didn't know that I would ever tell stories because I never wanted to. Didn't read them, figured I wouldn't write them, right? It's just I was, when I fell in love with Queen Latifah, I started writing poetry because even though, and for those of you, which looks like everybody of a certain age, right? You remember back then, they talked about rap music in such terrible ways. I know we all have a revisionist history now because of Lin-Manuel Miranda and everybody else. Right? But when the music was sort of doing what it was doing back then, everybody said, rap is this, that, and the third, parental advisory stickers, right? It's all this, it's too much violence, it's too crass, too crude. Even though rock and roll never had to deal with any of this for the record, right? None of this had, Ozzy Osbourne ripping their heads off at bats, and everyone's like, it's performance art, right? And so, but like a kid's telling you the story of his neighborhood, and you're like, this is way too violent and too crass and too crude instead of fixing his neighborhood. So I'm thinking about this at that time, and I'm realizing that everybody's been lying to me about this music, and then actually these were teenage geniuses. LL Cool J was in the 10th grade. There you go. See? Somebody in here know? Thank you, brother. There you go. First, he built that. Come on, man. Listen, anybody whoever says the word GOAT, I'm the GOAT. LL Cool J is who started that, right? So you're talking about kids, geniuses, poets who are writing the poetry in their own voices, in their own way, for their own culture and community at their own time, right? And that's all I wanted to do. That's what inspired me. So I did that at the age of 10, started to see my family and friends shift around the things that I was making because of all the loss in my life. These poems were read at funerals, right? So the first 10 things I wrote were read at the next 10 funerals. And so I got to see as a very young person the power of language firsthand, because these things are being read in a room full of mourning people. And people come to you and say, oh, I feel a little differently. Thank you for this, that. But when you're 10, that's power. And that's all I needed to know, was that there was power, and that if I had words, I had power. And all I wanted at 10 is power, to feel powerful. the writing for the sort of long form didn't start until I was 25, 24. So from 10 to 24, I thought I was going to be Langston Hughes. And my first deal came at 21 for poetry. HarperCollins published my poems. Me and my buddy Jason, we had this strange book, and HarperCollins published it basically as like a passion project for a retiring editor who was like, I'll publish. I don't know what it is, but I'll give it a shot. Right? Seriously, this is how it happened. And that publisher, that editor, worked with me for 3 years because she realized that she said that, like, I'm going to teach you how to write narrative arc. Had no idea the way, even story structure. If anyone's read my stories, you'll realize there's not a whole lot of plot because I don't know how to do it, right? I was never trained. I don't have the education for it, and I didn't study enough to learn it. And so she's showing me sort of like plot points and how the beats work and sort of rising action and denouement and falling action, right? We're going through all the things over a 3-year period. And I say, why are you teaching me this? I'm never going to write novels. And she said, sure you will. And I said, what makes you think so? And she said, sometimes you just know. And I said, but I don't have the education for it. And she said, that's where you're wrong. She was like, your intuition has gotten you here, and it'll take you farther than your education ever will.
Oh, that is such a powerful thing to know. Yeah. It also holds to the power that somebody who believes in you and the difference that makes.
Absolutely.
Because that doesn't just happen, but you have grown into this role. And I think now we are also here, this is 24 seconds from now, and you're crossing to young adults. And this novel, and what I was so caught and captivated by with this, it steps into new territory. It explores and reveals tenderness and newness of a romantic relationship of a high school boy from the point of view of a teenage boy. And I can promise you, when I was a teenage girl, I really needed a book like this because we're not often reminded that there is a tender heart and a romantic soul that these boys inhabit. How did you do that?
I mean, I think it comes from a place of necessity. You know, the older I get, the more I realize that there are parts of my humanity that have never been acknowledged. So there's this weird thing that happens as we sort of suss out who we are and who we want to be, and you start uncovering that there are whole parts of me that lie dormant, not because I haven't tried, but because no one has ever put name to it, or no one's ever asked me the necessary questions. You know, there's this famous quote by Hitchcock who says, a face is not a face until I put light on it, right? And there are parts of me that no one has ever put light on, right? And so in a casual conversation with some friends who are all my age and older, who were talking about, I was asking them, has anyone ever asked you about your first time? Not about sort of like the actual first time, but about how you felt emotionally leading up to what you knew was going to be your first time. And 100% of them said no. In the 40s and 50s. Right? These people are grown. And no one over the course of 30, 35 years no one's ever wondered about the emotional life, the interior life of a young boy trying to suss out his sexuality, his intimacy, his tenderness. No one's ever, what happens is that people just assume that we're all like walking phalluses. It's like they're feral animals. It's true. People talk about young boys as if they're feral animals. And it's just unfortunate because you rob them of a real part of their humanity, and then when they become feral animals, everybody is surprised. Imagine what it would be like to know that young men are just as insecure. You know it in theory, but to allow a young man to express his insecurities, his uncertainty, his fear and anxiety, his body image issues that so many of us have. And if you are black, because it is different, what we have to deal with is a particular stereotype pressed upon us by the time we're 11, 12 years old about the way our bodies are supposed to look and function more than anybody else's. A stereotype that goes all the way back to slavery that we're then sort of expected to enact, right? All of this pressure, the lies that we tell, right, which we all do, these strange lies. And so I just started to wonder about it. And while I'm thinking through all of those things, my little brother at the time, he turned 16 or 17. And he came to me, it's a bunch of siblings, and then it's like, some of y'all have those families, and then there's like the other kid, right? The one kid that came way later than everybody else, right? So he's like our nephew brother, right? And he came to me and he's like, yo, big bro, I just want to talk to you because Dad's too old now. I don't want to talk to him about this. I just want to talk to you about this, man. And I was like, well, what are your fears? And he says, man, I just don't what if I can't unlatch a bra? Now, at the time, I wanted to laugh at this. And then I thought about it and I thought, that's a real anxiety for a teenage boy. And all the men in the room, if you're heterosexual, all the men in the room, that was a real thing, right? And it seems so silly, but the truth is it was causing him great anxiety. And so I had an opportunity to tell him ways to sort of work around all this, and to also say, she's autonomous, and if you all are going to experience this beautiful moment, she can also do that herself, right? And this was a real sort of, and that you should also tell her you're afraid. Imagine if somebody would have told me, you could just say, I'm a little nervous. I don't know. My brain is saying this, my heart is saying this, my spirit is doing it. All of these things are happening. I've never felt so free and so encapsulated at the same time. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Let's just stumble through this together so at least it's healthy and we can take the pressure off. This ain't got to be romantic.
That's what I think is so amazing about your writing, because that is what you do. And you're doing this from a range. But with this book in particular, really, even as an adult woman, I'm saying, gosh, it's just wonderful to see the portrayal of an adolescent boy who has this beautiful heart and soul.
Everybody's scared of it, though. I mean, the book, I couldn't do any school visits with this book. And what's wild about it is, I did do school visits with this book in London. Talked to 8,000 teenagers, and it was fine. It's fine. The press says Jason Reynolds has written a book about two young people on the precipice of a life-changing moment. The UK press releases Jason Reynolds has written a book about a boy and his girlfriend as they explore their first time having sex. Right? And so one has to start to wonder, what are we really so afraid of? And granted, this isn't arbitrary or gratuitous, right? And also, just for the record, there's no sex in the book because I'm grown and I'm not interested.
Be clear about that. There's nothing graphic.
There's nothing graphic. No, but it does beg the question: what are we so afraid of? What is the boogeyman that everybody is so afraid of? And that fear is then sort of perpetuating a particular kind of harm. And there's a whole lot of us in here who had to be therapized at 30 because of shame that we carried for decisions that we made at 17.
Yeah, well, Judy Blume, I just have to say, so Judy Blume, which is the reference point, she's the legendary Judy Blume, whose writing has now gone through how many generations of young readers are transformed. And as you referenced earlier, and here is what she had to say about this. Jason Reynolds has done it again, but in a totally new way. His take on Neon's first time with Aria, his true love, is fresh from start to finish. Who wouldn't want a first-time partner like Neon? He's tender and sweet and scared and funny. He's a romantic. This is what it could be, should be, if only we were all as lucky as Aria. Girls, parentheses, and to everyone, wait for your Neon.
Yeah, shout out to Judy.
And that does lead. Now, Jason was also the Library of Congress's ambassador for young people's literature, which is a huge honor, an incredible award. And in this time and in this climate, and in fact, Jason was with me at the Penn Faulkner Award for Fiction a couple weeks ago. We were honoring with our Literary Champion Award, which now Mbola Mbowe was here some years ago too. Mbola Mbowe and I kind of cooked up this idea because we were hoping to get Oprah Winfrey originally. And it took us 2 years. We did get her. But we had this award for fiction, and we were honoring our Librarian of Congress, who is a remarkable person whom Jason will tell us about, who was fired, I think, the week before from her tenure at the Librarian of Congress, in which she had revolutionized this library, made it America's library, doing extraordinary work for young people, for adults, opened these doors to everyone, because the Library of Congress is America's library.
Yeah.
So tell us about that, and it feeds into the larger sphere of book banning and the climate we're in today.
It was, I mean, that's tricky. Serving as the national ambassador, first of all, to me, it was not an award. It was a job. I was, you know what I mean? Awards, you just get to like revel in. This was 3 years of grueling work and a real responsibility, right? I didn't want to take it lightly because I think there's a weight to that. It's just a federal position and you're representing the country as it pertains to literature and literacy, right? I took it as a very big deal and I did my job to the best of my ability, taking on an extra year in the middle of COVID, right? So I'm very proud of what I did all small towns, Main Street America, because the truth is that politics aside, everybody kids is my kids. I could care less what you feel about me. I love your babies regardless. I could care less. Like, you could say what you need to say about me. I done seen every write-up. I done seen the newspaper articles. I've seen political cartoons where police officers are shooting my books. And I've seen, like, all of the things. I've had the threats. I've been put my life on the line many times, going to places where everyone has been afraid that I'm to be. I've had security details and all the other nonsense. And the truth is, when I show up to these places, everybody, kids come up and give me hugs and handshakes and high fives, and we sign these. Like, I don't care about you. Love your babies, right? I'm concerned about your children. You're gonna go. You're closer to being out of here than they are. So I need to make sure that the runway ahead of them is a runway that of fortitude and fairness. I ain't worried about it, right? And so when I took the position and I do my job, and I'm all through Montana and Iowa and all down to Mississippi and Alabama, and I'm doing the things, 400 people in a town, 600 people in a town, first time ever seen a black person in real life, all this, like, real stuff. This is a real thing, right? I'm on the reservations, right? All these spaces. I was reminded that the kids are all right, but I also I had particular rules that I had to follow because this is a federal position. And because Dr. Hayden, her job is also on the line, right? I'm representing her as well. So Dr. Hayden is like, look, despite what your feelings are, you can't go down there talking about, like, you have to be careful here because you represent the country. You're bipartisan. So you have to tuck some of that in. It can't be about your feelings around your political beliefs, unfortunately, right? Because you're going to be going places where there are going to be different belief systems, and you still represent those folks. That was Dr. Hayden. Dr. Hayden from Baltimore City, a woman who had a very strong constitution and a high level of integrity, understood what the job was and the severity of the job, and played it fair. She never shut anybody down. She never leaned one way or the other. She understood how to do the dance in the right way, because it's books, right? At the end of the day, whatever you believe, when you come in here, this is a world of books. Whatever you're looking for is in here. My job is not to turn you away or to say what you should or should not be reading. America is a place full of many ideas. I have my own, and they are strong, especially in today's time. That being said, the library doors are open to all. And if you lived in D.C. like I do, I lived down the street from the Library of Congress. It was also the first time where the library felt like the city's library as well. Growing up in a city where you got the nation's library, but you feel like it ain't yours, is a weird thing. I never even knew you could get a library card from the Library of Congress until Dr. Hayden got there and was like, you need to come in here and see me. You need to get you a library card. Let me show you this. Let me show you that. It was amazing, the resources that she made available. And she shifted even the way we thought about what a library could be, let alone a library of this magnitude. But like the way she talked, the way she was very much, she was what we wanted every librarian to be, and honestly, what most librarians are. She was just able to put it on a big stage to spotlight it.
And that's where, and now we just have to make sure, and here, all of you are here today, we just have to keep championing the work of our writers.
Yeah.
And it is the way that we make our way in the world. And you have a piece, there was a video piece called The Dreamer that looks at your life. And you're looking at a computer screen, and this is, again, how your creative brain works. You're looking at this computer screen, and you're looking at the white space on a page, And with that page, you're sort of creating a score with the white space on the page, and you catch the rhythm of words on the page, which I brought props. Jason can do everything. Okay, first of all, this is one prop, and he won't believe I'm bringing it up because my son has a coffee company. However, Jason Reynolds also created a coffee company.
Yeah,
Okay, you have to tell us for 1 second about that.
It's just that me and my buddies are looking for something else to do.
That's kind of amazing.
And Mary's sons own DC when it comes to coffee, so we can't compete. You know what I mean? But we have our little roastery. We're just having fun, that's all.
I had to bring it up, it's okay. But anyway, I feel like, okay, and I had this done like a record cover because I felt like this is like an album. All right, there's no end to your creativity because you have now produced soundtrack. And when I saw this about the white space on a page and how you see things like a score, which directly leads into this, so you have to tell us what you're doing.
Soundtrack, I see everything is musical. Everything, I mean, I was trained as a poet, and poetry, so much of poetry is about meter, right? It's all like metronomic, You're thinking about sort of the way the words, like if the words are clicking, right? And when I say metronomically, I mean like a metronome, right? If we set the metronome and it's like, tick, 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 then when I'm writing the words or when I'm reading the words, they need to fall sort of on the beat, right? And that's what poetry does. We can read anybody. I mean, Shakespeare, right? When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, right? Like we can, Shakespeare is probably most famous for this because of his sort of iambic pentameter and writing Shakespearean sonnets, and sort of it was so structured and so strict, and neither here nor there. So I love that kind of stuff, and all of my books, if you're reading any of my stuff, it all sounds a little musical. It's rhythmic. Some of that's also just innate, right? Soundtrack is a book, this started as this is a novel. It just was never published.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
This is a novel. So I wrote this as a novel 10 years ago. In 2015, I wrote a novel about some kids on the subway in New York City, and they form a jazz band, right? / funk band. They form a jam band, basically. And they go on tour in the New York City subway system, underground, right? So they're doing like tour stops, and it's growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, right? The buskers. And I write the novel, I give it to my publisher, my editor, and she just sort of like takes the next thing and bumps it, and then takes the next thing and bumps it, because she didn't have the heart to just say, I don't like it. Mind you, I loved it. Right? Which is probably why I was like, this is a great story, right? But eventually it just kind of got, All American Boys came, Ghost came, but this was before all of those books. This was right after Boy in a Black Suit, so that's book number 3, I think. Book number 2, number 3. So I put it in a drawer. I was like, all right, you swing and you miss, it's okay. Like, I'm a writer, and writers write. Doesn't mean writers always publish, right? Writers write, and so I'm like, all right, no problem. 10 years later, I get a call from a buddy of mine named Dan, who is basically like the Rick Rubin of audiobooks, right? He's the guy with the Midas touch when it comes to, if you've ever heard an audiobook that you love, most likely it came from Dan and Penguin Random House. And so Dan calls me, good friend of mine, and he's like, look, man, we're starting this new thing, and I'm itching, I need to shake it up. I want to do something big, something fresh. Do you have anything that I can like fool around with? And I was like, man, I got this book I made 10 years ago. They didn't want it. I'm giving them my sob story, right? They didn't want it. And he's like, well, let me see. I'm like, what is it about? I'm like, it's about these musicians in New York City. Dan's a New York guy. Dan's also a music guy. So I hand him the book. I'm like, it's unedited. Well, I did one editorial pass with my agent. I'm like, there's one edit on it. I don't know what shape this is in. I haven't touched it in a decade. And Dan calls me back and is like, oh, this is perfect. We're going to make something. And that's it. Like, he didn't change anything.
It's layers of stuff. Explain what this means.
So basically what it is it's just an audio experience. There is no book, there is no transcript. It's just an audio experience. It does not exist as a book, but it's full cast, full band, this is the most produced piece of audio story that exists to date. I'm talking like you hear the halal man, the halal truck, many New Yorkers. You hear the man in the halal truck. You hear the candy kids come on the train. You hear, everything. This is a whole world that is built just audio. And he took everything I made in that book and turned it into sound. And the cast, they're all New York kids, so they all have varying versions of the New York City accent, because those of you who know New York, you know that it's weird when you turn on TV and you see like the New York accent, because there's one New York accent and that's not the way it is. That's not true, right? And so there's all these varying sort of New York City accents, young kids and older people, the moms and the dads and the aunts and the uncles. It is really an incredible piece of, 6 hours of just beauty. It's like a symphony.
That's why I did this like an album, because I felt like it should be like an album. Like
well, it was supposed to be a record, but they sent out record samplers, by the way. I do have a record, which is beautiful, by the way, but it's only of chapter 7. They couldn't do the whole thing as an album just because it's too long. It'd be like six records. It just would have been too much.
Well, here we are on this island where we have incredible, endless blue skies generally, and seas. And I feel like, Jason, your heart is as big as the sky. Your spirit and soul are so soaring and endless like an ocean. And I want to know, in the time that we're in, and Bob Woodward referenced it, our writers are referencing it, we're in a different climate right now.
Yeah.
So what gives you hope as you're moving forward with all of your writing and just with who you are as a person? What gives you hope right now?
For me, hope is always easy to access because I'm one of the lucky ones who gets to spend his life around children. I'm never a person who was without hope. I don't scare easy. I never give up. Like, I'm just not built like that. And maybe that's because I have too much to fight for because I'm around children all the time. So my life is always preoccupied by the fact that young people always find the light. You know what I mean? I'm meeting this young brother right here, and he came up to me and I shook his hand and signed his book. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's enough. If you look in this kid's face and you feel hopeless, that's on you. That ain't got nothing to do with what's going on. If he doesn't offer you a salve, a balm, even if for a moment, then you gotta check that's something about you. Your spirit is broken to a point that you should really do some reconsideration, right? If there's a resonant frequency, I love sort of any kind of nerdy anything actually, but I've been doing all this work around like engineering, because I think engineers are like concrete magicians. They're like real magicians, right? And I was doing all this work around resonant frequency, which is the concept that this is what keeps bridges standing, right? But if the resonant frequency is off and the wind blows and it hits a particular resonant frequency, then it could topple a bridge, right? Or this is why the operatic singer can break a glass, right? She sort of sings at the exact resonant frequency of the glass and it shatters a glass. And I'm always thinking to myself, is there a resonant frequency for all of humanity? Is there one thing that we all could hear, a frequency that we all might hear or experience that will crumble us or that will soften us, everybody, at the same time? And after years and years of thinking about this, I think the answer is the laugh of a child. If we were in this room and there was somebody sad, if there was somebody hateful, whatever the feelings may be, and suddenly there's a 2-year-old who bursts into laughter in the back of the room, everybody feels the same thing inside. That gives me hope, right? There's something about that. That gives me hope.
And now you have this sense of this magnificent humanity that is beating here. And I feel like of all the stars in our literary universe, you're just your own constellation. And we're so very grateful that you made your time and your way to Nantucket to be with us.
Well, of course,
Thank you
my
so
pleasure.
much, Jason.
Of course. Thank you.